Have you ever felt like a ghost, walking through a crowded room, speaking words no one hears, offering gifts no one sees? Have you ever poured your entire being into something beautiful, only to have it vanish into the vast ocean of the unnoticed? This is not a story of an ordinary architect, but of a woman who understood invisibility on a cellular level, a woman named Tasha Bellamy, 38 years old, living in the bustling, indifferent heart of Chicago. For 38 years, Tasha had existed in the shadow of her two elder brothers, brilliant men who commanded rooms with their intellect and charmed the world with their charisma. They were the suns in her family's firmament, and Tasha, despite her quiet brilliance, her meticulous eye for design, her profound understanding of the way light could sculpt space and emotion, was merely a distant, unacknowledged moon. Each birthday came and went, a cruel reminder of her perennial eclipse. Cards arrived for her brothers, calls flooded in for their achievements, but for Tasha, the day of her birth became just another Tuesday, indistinguishable from the rest. The silence on her 38th birthday was not just quiet, it was deafening, echoing the hollow ache in her chest. A small, wilted cupcake sat on her desk, self-bought, its single candle a pathetic flicker against the grandeur of the Sterling and Vance architect's office. Outside, the city thrummed with a nervous energy, the air charged with anticipation for the night's grand event, the unveiling of the new lighting installation on the city's tallest tower, the Zenith Spire. It was a project that had consumed the firm, a monumental undertaking designed to redefine the Chicago skyline. Tasha had worked on it, of course, her name listed among a dozen junior associates, her sketches, her innovative concepts, her bold visions consistently relegated to the waste bin or, worse, subtly absorbed into the main design by others, sanitized of her distinctive spark. Marcus Thorne, the senior project manager, a man whose ambition was only outmatched by his profound lack of imagination, had spearheaded the project. He favored convention, abhorred risk, and viewed Tasha's artistic sensibilities as frivolous, an unnecessary deviation from engineering efficiency. His Zenith Spire, Tasha knew, would be technically flawless, dazzling in its scale, yet utterly devoid of soul, a cold monument of light. As the sun began its descent, painting the skyscraper windows in hues of orange and violet, Tasha watched from her office window, her reflection, a solitary figure against the panoramic backdrop of the city, seeming to disappear entirely into the glass. The ignored birthday was not just an oversight, it was a powerful, silent declaration of her worthlessness, a lifetime of being told, implicitly, that she did not matter. But tonight, something would shift, something unforgettable. The sting of her overlooked birthday settled deep into Tasha's bones, hardening into a quiet resolve. It was not anger, not entirely, but a profound sadness that had finally found its breaking point. She thought of all the designs, all the intricate diagrams, the countless hours she had poured into mastering the ephemeral art of light, only for her work to be rendered invisible, just like her. The Zenith Spire project was a particularly painful testament to this pattern. Days earlier, in a design review, she had proposed a dynamic light sequence for the tower's crown, a narrative of light that would ebb and flow with the city's heartbeat, mimicking the subtle shifts of the Chicago River, telling a story of resilience and aspiration. Marcus Thorne had scoffed, dismissing it as overly poetic and financially irresponsible. His words, sharp and dismissive, had cut through the quiet hum of the meeting room like a knife. "We are architects, Miss Bellamy, not poets," he had declared, his gaze sweeping over the room, inviting silent agreement from the other senior partners who nodded dutifully, avoiding Tasha's gaze. Even Mr. Elias Vance, the CEO, a formidable man known for his astute business acumen and his distant, almost regal demeanor, had simply observed, his expression unreadable, before moving the discussion forward. The official design, as finalized by Marcus, was a stark, static brilliance, a powerful but utterly uninspired beacon, a testament to efficiency over emotion. It was technically perfect, yes, but devoid of the very essence that Tasha believed light could embody, a living, breathing pulse. As the deadline loomed, the pressure within Sterling and Vance became palpable. Late nights were common, but Tasha's were different. While others left at midnight, weary but satisfied, Tasha often remained, her small office bathed in the soft glow of her monitor. She wasn't just checking calculations or reviewing blueprints. She was lost in a different world, a digital canvas where light bent to her will, where shadows danced with purpose, and where the zenith spire, in her mind's eye, became a living poem. She had started a secret project, a parallel design for the tower's lighting, an unauthorized symphony of illumination. It was a defiant act, born of desperation and an unyielding belief in her own vision. She worked on it in stolen moments, after hours, on weekends, fueled by stale coffee and a burning need to see her art realized, even if only for herself. She delved deep into the tower's existing systems, studying the schematics Marcus had dismissed as too complex for junior staff. She discovered a hidden bypass, a minor vulnerability in the system's robust security, a backdoor that could, if expertly manipulated, allow her to momentarily override specific sections of the lighting grid. It was reckless, she knew, potentially career-ending. But the thought of another year, another lifetime, spent in the shadows, felt like a slow, agonizing death. She had to try. One evening, as she worked, hunched over her glowing screen, a quiet shadow fell over her desk. Elias Vance, the CEO, stood there, his usual stern expression softened by curiosity. He had been working late himself, observing the diligent hum of the office. He watched Tasha, her brow furrowed in concentration, her fingers flying across the keyboard, shaping something he couldn't quite decipher. He saw the passion in her movements, the intensity in her gaze, a rare fire that stood in stark contrast to the weary resignation he often saw in his employees. He cleared his throat, and Tasha startled, quickly minimizing the intricate light model on her screen. She mumbled an apology, embarrassment flushing her cheeks. Vance simply nodded, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Dedication," he stated, his voice a low rumble, "is a rare commodity, Miss Bellamy. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." He turned and walked away, leaving Tasha alone in the quiet office, a seed of an idea beginning to sprout in his mind. Tasha's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched Mr. Vance retreat. His words, though seemingly innocuous, resonated with an unexpected weight. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Had he seen something? Did he suspect her secret project, or was he merely offering a generic platitude? She dismissed it as the latter, accustomed to receiving only token acknowledgments, if any at all. Her attention snapped back to her screen, the intricate lines and luminous simulations of her alternative Zenith Spire design. She knew her vision was superior, not just aesthetically, but conceptually. Marcus's design was about brute force, blinding light. Hers was about narrative, about the poetry of illumination, about the story a building could tell without uttering a single word. She felt a surge of defiant energy, a primal need to assert her artistic identity. The next morning, fueled by a dangerous cocktail of desperation and conviction, Tasha decided to make one last, official attempt to present her ideas. She meticulously prepared a condensed presentation, focusing on the practical benefits of her dynamic lighting sequences, energy efficiency, adaptability for future events, and, most importantly, the creation of an iconic, emotionally resonant landmark that would draw global attention. She knew the risks of challenging Marcus Thorne directly, especially with the launch just days away, but she felt she had nothing left to lose. She intercepted him as he strode confidently through the office, a phalanx of junior architects trailing behind him. "Mr. Thorne," Tasha began, her voice steadier than her trembling hands, "I have some refinements to the Zenith Spire lighting that I believe could significantly enhance the project's impact." She held out a flash drive, her offering. Marcus stopped, his impeccably tailored suit seeming to bristle with disdain. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, narrowed to slits as he glanced at the drive, then at Tasha, a dismissive smirk playing on his lips. "Refinements, Miss Bellamy?" He scoffed, his voice carrying just enough to draw the attention of nearby colleagues. "The Zenith Spire project is finalized. We don't have time for your artistic endeavors. This is a multi-million-dollar installation, not a canvas for your personal expressions." He made artistic sound like a disease. "But sir," Tasha pressed, her voice rising slightly, "these aren't just artistic. They leverage the existing infrastructure in novel ways, creating a more sustainable and captivating display. It's about more than just brightness. It's about resonance." Marcus leaned in, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, though his tone was no less cutting. "Listen, Bellamy. Your job is to follow instructions, not to second-guess senior management. Your ideas have been reviewed, and they were deemed impractical. Now, step aside. We have real work to do." He gestured dismissively with his hand, as if shooing away a fly. His junior entourage snickered, and Tasha felt the familiar prickle of tears behind her eyes, the familiar tightening in her throat. She gripped the flash drive, her knuckles white. She looked up, her gaze locking with his, and for a fleeting moment, a spark of defiance, of pure, unadulterated conviction, flashed in her eyes. "My ideas might be impractical to those who lack imagination, Mr. Thorne," she stated, her voice trembling but firm. "But they are not without merit." Marcus's face hardened, his jaw tightening. "That's enough, Miss Bellamy. Return to your duties." He brushed past her, his scent of expensive cologne, a final, arrogant insult. Tasha stood frozen, the flash drive a useless lump in her hand, the weight of his dismissal crushing her. She felt, once again, utterly, irrevocably invisible. Unbeknownst to Tasha, Elias Vance had witnessed the entire exchange from the doorway of his office, his expression a tight mask. He had seen the quiet dignity in Tasha's stance, the flicker of defiance in her eyes, and the callous disregard of his project manager. A thought, audacious and dangerous, began to form in his mind. He had been growing increasingly disillusioned with the soulless perfection of their firm's work, and in Tasha, he saw a spark that Marcus Thorne had tried so desperately to extinguish. That spark was exactly what Sterling and Vance desperately needed. The humiliation of Marcus Thorne's public dismissal festered within Tasha, morphing from quiet despair into a volatile cocktail of anger and fierce determination. The ignored birthday, the years of overlooked contributions, the dismissive sneers, they coalesced into a singular, undeniable truth. She would not be silenced. Not tonight. The grand unveiling of the Zenith Spire was less than an hour away. The city buzzed with anticipation. Dignitaries, investors, and the press were gathering at the viewing platform, all eager to witness Sterling and Vance's latest masterpiece. Marcus Thorne moved through the crowd, a self-satisfied grin plastered on his face, accepting congratulations for a triumph not yet revealed. Tasha, however, was not among the throngs. She was elsewhere, deep within the metallic arteries of the Zenith Spire itself, in a rarely used maintenance corridor on the 90th floor. Her hands, surprisingly steady despite the rapid pulse thrumming in her temples, moved with practiced precision. She had found a way. After days of meticulous planning, leveraging her intimate knowledge of the tower's complex lighting systems, she had identified a small, overlooked substation, a redundant control panel intended for emergency overrides. It was a loophole, a tiny crack in Marcus's meticulously sealed design, and she was about to exploit it. She had smuggled in a modified laptop, its screen glowing faintly in the dim corridor, displaying an intricate web of code and a real-time schematic of the tower's lighting grid. This wasn't just about showing off, it was about reclaiming her voice, about demonstrating that true artistry could coexist with technical brilliance. This was her desperate act, her final, audacious gamble to be seen. She worked quickly, bypassing the primary controls, routing a portion of the tower's colossal energy supply through her own unauthorized sequence. She wasn't altering the entire display, not initially. Her plan was far more subtle, a creeping insurgency of light. She would overlay her dynamic patterns onto Marcus's static brilliance, weaving her narrative thread through his rigid tapestry, a ghost in the machine, a whisper, not a shout. She typed a final command, her breath held tight in her chest. A green light blinked on her screen, signaling success. The system was now primed. She packed her laptop, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. She had to get to the viewing platform, to witness her rebellion, to see if her silent scream would finally echo across the skyline. As she navigated the sterile corridors, her mind replayed every slight, every dismissal. The condescending tone of her family, the casual disregard of her colleagues, the outright contempt of Marcus Thorne. This was not just for her. It was for every forgotten artist, every unheard voice, every person whose brilliance had been dismissed as impractical. This was for the ghost, finally refusing to remain unseen. Elias Vance, meanwhile, stood at the viewing platform, exchanging polite pleasantries with investors, but his gaze kept drifting to the towering silhouette of the zenith spire, anticipating the moment of its grand illumination. He had reviewed Marcus's final plan. It was competent, predictable, solid. But as he thought back to Tasha Bellamy, to the quiet intensity he had seen in her, to the dismissive arrogance of Marcus Thorne, a strange unease settled over him. He had seen too many competent projects. What he craved, what the firm needed, was something truly exceptional, something that transcended the ordinary. He had a hunch, a feeling he couldn't quite shake, that Tasha Bellamy possessed that very quality. The clock ticked down, 10 seconds, 9, 8. Tasha emerged onto the viewing platform, merging with the excited crowd, her eyes fixed on the majestic structure, a knot of dread and exhilaration twisting in her stomach. This was it, the moment of truth. The countdown echoed across the viewing platform, each digit amplifying the collective anticipation. 10, 9, 8. Tasha stood amidst the throng, a solitary figure consumed by a tumultuous blend of fear and exhilaration. Her gaze was locked on the zenith spire, its dark form a colossal silhouette against the deepening twilight. Elias Vance stood nearby, his usual composed demeanor subtly fractured by an uncharacteristic tension. He felt a strange premonition, an intuition that tonight would be anything but ordinary. Marcus Thorne, beaming with self-congratulation, raised his hand dramatically. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed into the microphone, "behold the future of Chicago's skyline." His voice was thick with triumph. The crowd erupted in a ripple of applause. 7, 6, 5. The air crackled with energy. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. A burst of blinding white light erupted from the base of the zenith spire, racing upwards, illuminating the tower in a powerful, uniform glow. It was magnificent in its sheer scale, technically flawless, just as Marcus had promised. The crowd gasped, then applauded, a polite, appreciative sound. It was impressive, yes, but Tasha felt a familiar pang of disappointment. It was exactly as she had predicted, grand but soulless, a monument, not a story. Then, subtly at first, something shifted. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer began to ripple across the tower's surface, a delicate undulation of light that played against the stark white brilliance. It was a subtle pulse, a gentle breath against the tower's rigid form, mimicking the ebb and flow of a hidden current. The applause began to falter, replaced by murmurs of confusion, then wonder. Marcus Thorne, still basking in his initial triumph, frowned. He glanced at the control technicians, who shrugged, equally bewildered. This was not part of the program. Tasha's heart leaped. It was working. Her overlay, her subtle intrusion, was manifesting. The shimmer grew stronger, morphing into intricate patterns that danced across the building's facade. Geometric shapes dissolved into organic flows, sharp lines softened into curves, each transition seamless, purposeful. The tower, moments ago a static pillar, began to tell a story. Light chased light, creating a sense of movement, of life. The crowd fell silent, their gazes riveted, no longer merely observing, but captivated. They weren't just seeing light, they were feeling it, experiencing a visual narrative unfold before their very eyes. Elias Vance felt a jolt. This wasn't Marcus's work. This was the nuance, the emotional depth he had glimpsed in Tasha's earlier, dismissed sketches. He remembered her passion, her insistence on resonance. His eyes darted to Tasha, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd, her face illuminated by the spectacle, a fragile hope blossoming in her gaze. Suddenly, the entire tower seemed to surge with a new kind of energy. The intricate patterns accelerated, building to a breathtaking crescendo. And then, at the very pinnacle of the zenith spire, in a dazzling burst of golden light that seemed to stretch into the heavens, a single, monumental letter formed: T. It hung there for a breathless second, then dissolved, replaced by an A, then an S, then an H, and finally, an A. Tasha. The name, rendered in pure, luminous light, hung across the Chicago skyline for a full, glorious minute, a shimmering, undeniable testament to one woman's vision. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by an explosion of cheers, louder and more fervent than anything Marcus's initial display had garnered. This was not polite applause. This was awe. This was revelation. Marcus Thorne stood frozen, his face ashen, his jaw slack. "What is this?" he bellowed, turning to the technicians, but his voice was drowned out by the thunderous roar of the crowd. Elias Vance, however, did not look at Marcus. He looked directly at Tasha, his stern features breaking into an almost imperceptible smile. Her name, shining brighter than any star, was a beacon of undeniable talent, a silent declaration that the invisible had finally, spectacularly, made herself seen. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, a tidal wave of awe and exhilaration that crashed over Tasha. Her name, spelled out in colossal letters of pure light across the zenith spire, burned itself into her retinas, a searing, beautiful truth. It was real. She was seen. The catharsis was overwhelming, a lifetime of invisibility shattering in that single incandescent moment. Marcus Thorne, however, was a portrait of unadulterated fury. His face, contorted in a mask of rage, was livid under the glow of the rogue lights. "Bellamy!" He shrieked, elbowing his way through the throng, his voice a guttural snarl that barely cut through the celebratory din. "What have you done? You've sabotaged my launch. This is insubordination of the highest order. You're finished." He lunged towards her, his hand raised as if to grab her, to physically extinguish the light she had dared to create. But a strong, steady hand intercepted him. Elias Vance, the CEO, stood between Marcus and Tasha, his posture radiating a quiet, unwavering authority that immediately commanded attention. His eyes, usually cool and calculating, held a spark of something akin to admiration as he looked at Tasha. "Sabotage, Mr. Thorne?" Vance's voice was calm, cutting through Marcus's hysteria with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. He turned his gaze to the tower, which continued to cycle through Tasha's dynamic, mesmerizing sequences, occasionally flashing her name in a brilliant flourish. "I see ingenuity. I see vision. I see exactly what Sterling and Vance claims to represent, yet rarely delivers." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air, a silent accusation against Marcus's sterile leadership. Marcus stammered, his bravado crumbling. But, sir, this was unauthorized. This is chaos. It's unprofessional." Vance merely raised an eyebrow. "Is it chaos, Mr. Thorne, when it captivates every single person here, when it elicits a response that your professional work never could, when it creates a monument that will be remembered, not just for its height, but for its heart? He turned to the crowd, his voice now amplified by an unexpected mic handed to him by a quick-thinking staff member. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vance announced, his voice resonating with newfound conviction, "tonight, you have witnessed not merely an installation, but a revelation. This spectacular, vibrant display, this living story told through light, is the singular vision of one of our own, a brilliant architect whose genius has, for too long, remained in the shadows. The artistry you see before you is the work of Tasha Bellamy." A fresh wave of applause erupted, this time directed solely at Tasha. Flashbulbs popped, cameras zoomed in, and reporters surged forward, their questions already forming on their lips. Tasha felt a flush of heat, a mix of overwhelming emotion and disbelief. She looked at Vance, his eyes meeting hers, holding her gaze with a sincerity she had never expected from him. He wasn't just acknowledging her, he was championing her. He was dismantling the wall of invisibility that had surrounded her entire life, brick by luminous brick. Marcus Thorne stood aghast, his face a mask of utter defeat. His carefully constructed facade of control had crumbled, exposed for its rigidity and lack of imagination. Vance's public endorsement of Tasha was not just a professional blow, it was a profound personal humiliation. The air thrummed with the energy of recognition, a powerful force that seemed to lift Tasha above the mundane, placing her, finally, where she belonged, in the light. The world had shifted on its axis. The news of the Zenith Spire's rogue, magnificent light show and the subsequent revelation of Tasha Bellamy's authorship exploded across every media channel. She was no longer the invisible daughter, the overlooked architect. She was the visionary who had defied convention, the artist who had painted the Chicago skyline with light and emotion. The morning after the launch, Tasha arrived at Sterling and Vance to a starkly different reception. The hushed, dismissive atmosphere had been replaced by a buzzing anticipation. Colleagues who had previously ignored her or casually usurped her ideas now offered nervous smiles and awkward congratulations. The whispers that followed her were no longer about her perceived inadequacies, but about her audacious brilliance. Marcus Thorne was nowhere to be seen. Rumors swirled that he had been placed on administrative leave, a swift, decisive consequence of his arrogance and Vance's newfound appreciation for radical innovation. Tasha found herself summoned directly to Elias Vance's opulent corner office, a space usually reserved for high-stakes client meetings and executive pronouncements. Vance stood by the vast window, gazing out at the very tower that now bore Tasha's signature. He turned as she entered, a genuine, if still rare, smile gracing his lips. "Miss Bellamy," he began, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "What you did last night was reckless. It was unauthorized. It defied every protocol we have in place." Tasha braced herself, preparing for the reprimand she still, deep down, expected. But Vance merely shook his head, a wry amusement in his eyes. "And it was the most brilliant thing I have seen in 20 years at this firm. You didn't just light a building, Tasha. You lit up the entire city, and you woke me up." He gestured to a plush armchair. "Please, sit." Tasha sank into the chair, still slightly dazed. "Sir, I apologize for the insubordination. I just felt I had to show what was possible." Vance nodded slowly. "And you did. More than possible. You showed us necessary. This firm has grown stale, Miss Bellamy. We have been chasing profits and prestige, and in doing so, we've lost our soul. You, with your impractical ideas, reminded us what true architecture, true art, is about." He walked to his imposing desk, picking up a folder. "I've been reviewing your portfolio, everything from your early student work to your internal proposals that were, shall we say, misplaced by certain individuals." He fixed her with a direct, earnest gaze. Your talent is undeniable, Tasha. Your unique vision is precisely what Sterling and Vance needs to redefine itself in this evolving industry. He pushed the folder across the desk. I'm offering you a new role. Head of a brand new division, experiential architecture. Your mandate will be to explore and implement innovative, human-centric design, starting with urban installations and public art projects. You will have full creative control, the resources you need, and a team dedicated to bringing your most ambitious visions to life. Tasha stared at the folder, then at Vance, tears welling in her eyes. It was everything she had ever dreamed of, everything she had been told she was not capable of. It was validation, not just for her talent, but for her very being. Mr. Vance, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. Vance smiled, a genuine, transformative expression. Say yes, Tasha. Say yes to the light you were born to create. Say yes to the voice you've finally found. Tasha's acceptance was a quiet, fervent whisper, but it resonated with the power of a shouted declaration. Yes, Mr. Vance. Yes. The word felt like a key, unlocking a door that had been sealed for 38 years. The transition was swift, almost dizzying. Marcus Thorne was indeed reassigned, his rigid adherence to the old ways leaving no room for growth in Vance's newly enlightened vision. Tasha, however, soared. Her new division, experiential architecture, became the heartbeat of Sterling and Vance, injecting a vibrant artistic pulse into the firm's traditional projects. Her ideas, once dismissed as impractical, were now celebrated as groundbreaking. She cultivated a team of like-minded designers, fostering an environment where creativity was encouraged, where the emotional impact of design was paramount. Tasha, the once invisible architect, found her voice, not just in her work, but in her interactions. She spoke with newfound confidence in meetings, her insights now sought after, her opinions valued. The quiet girl who had shrunk from the spotlight now commanded it with grace and authority. The Zenith Spire project became a permanent fixture, its dynamic lights captivating the city every night, a living testament to Tasha's original vision. Tourists flocked to witness its unique light narrative, and Sterling and Vance, once known for its solid, if predictable, structures, gained a reputation for innovative, emotionally resonant architecture. And then, there was her family. News travels fast, especially when your name is splashed across national news and the Chicago skyline. Her brothers, once so engrossed in their own achievements, were forced to confront the undeniable brilliance of their sister. The phone calls started, tentative at first, then increasingly enthusiastic. Her 39th birthday arrived not with silence, but with a deluge of well wishes, flowers, and even a surprise party thrown by her genuinely proud, if somewhat bewildered, family. They acknowledged her, truly acknowledged her, for the first time in her life. It was not a grand, dramatic apology, but a slow, gradual shift in their perception, a recognition that the moon, too, could hold its own light, even outshine the sun when given the chance. Tasha, however, did not revel in their belated attention. She accepted it with quiet dignity, no longer craving their validation, for she had found her own. She carried herself with a new kind of strength, an inner light that radiated outwards. She understood that true recognition wasn't came from within, cultivated by unwavering belief in one's own worth, even when the world chose to ignore it. Her journey had taught her that invisibility was a choice, one imposed by others, but ultimately accepted by the self. She had chosen to reject it, not with anger, but with the quiet, persistent force of her own truth, illuminated for all to see. Tasha Bellamy, the architect of light, had finally built a life that reflected her brightest dreams, reminding everyone that the most profound brilliance often lies hidden, waiting for the courage to shine. The story of Tasha Bellamy is not just about an architect and a building, it's about the profound human need to be seen, to be acknowledged, to have one's unique light recognized. It's a testament to the quiet strength of those who labor in the shadows, whose gifts are often dismissed as unconventional or unnecessary. How many brilliant ideas, how many compassionate hearts, how many truly transformative visions are dimmed, year after year, by the indifference of a world too busy looking at the loud, the obvious, the already celebrated? Tasha's story reminds us that true genius often doesn't roar, it whispers, it paints in the subtle shades, it patiently crafts beauty when no one is watching. It speaks to the courage it takes to stand in your truth, even when the very people who should lift you up try to tear you down. It underscores the vital role of the perceptive authority figure, the one person willing to look beyond the superficial, to see the value in the unconventional, and to take a risk on the hidden gem. It is a powerful call to action for each of us, to not only recognize our own inherent worth, but to actively seek out and champion the unsung heroes in our own lives. To be the catalyst for someone else's breakthrough. To challenge the cynical gatekeepers who would stifle creativity and dismiss potential. Look around you, truly look. Who do you know who is brimming with talent, with a unique perspective, with a dream that feels too big for them to voice? Who is quietly excelling, tirelessly contributing, yet remains perpetually in the background? Perhaps it's a colleague whose innovative ideas are always tabled, a friend whose artistic talent goes unremarked, or even a family member whose quiet strength is taken for granted. Don't let their light remain unseen. Share this story, not just as a tale of triumph, but as a mirror reflecting the potential in every overlooked individual. Comment below and tell us about someone you know who deserves to be seen, whose name should be spelled out in lights. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person, one moment of true recognition to transform a lifetime of invisibility into a sky full of shimmering possibility. Be that person. Look closer. See the light.